The commerce quarter of Orbit 9 shimmered like a jewel suspended in the void. Its vaulted ceilings were alive with bands of light that shifted color with the hour, casting a perpetual glow on stalls that overflowed with silks, spices, and delicacies brought from 100 different worlds. Jack Welch walked the broad concourse with a soldier's stride, boots clicking against polished metal tiles that reflected the neon brilliance overhead. For the first time in 3 months, he wasn't counting rations or watching supply lines. Shore leave was supposed to be simple. Rest, food, maybe a drink that didn't taste like recycled water. His stomach growled at the scents wafting from food vendors' spiced broth from Tarsize, grilled insect skewers from Vela, sweet fruits with skins that glowed faintly under the artificial lights. He patted his jacket pocket, reassured by the solid weight of his credit chip. He could afford to indulge tonight. The rhythm of the market fractured as raised voices carried over the din. Ahead, a knot of bodies gathered around the front of Gronex Provisions, one of the most exclusive shops in the quarter. Its glass facade shimmered with embedded light filaments, a quiet declaration that what lay beyond was reserved for the powerful. 2 Varian guards, towering figures with carapace-armored torsos and clicking mandibles, blocked the entrance. Between them, shoved unceremoniously onto the floor, was a woman. Her skin was the color of storm-touched seas, pale blue with a dullness that spoke of age and hardship. Her clothes were little more than rags beige fabric, stained and threadbare. Silver hair spilled from a frayed binding at the back of her head. "I only need a few items," she pleaded, her voice tremulous yet oddly melodic. "I can pay next cycle when my stipend—" "No credits, no entry," the first guard snapped, mandibles clattering. His companion gave her a push that nearly sent her sprawling. "This isn't a charity ward." The crowd murmured, but didn't interfere. A few smirked, others averted their eyes, uncomfortable but unwilling to risk involvement. Jack felt a cold pressure build in his chest. He'd seen this before, power exercised casually against those who couldn't fight back. He'd sworn when he left the frontier that he wanted peace, quiet, a life without constant decisions of right and wrong. But some instincts never dulled. He stepped forward, shouldering through the bystanders, until he stood only a few feet from the scene. "That's enough," he said. His voice carried the weight of command, firm without needing to shout. The Varian guards turned, compound eyes narrowing. "This doesn't concern you, human," one hissed. Jack ignored them and crouched beside the woman. Her eyes lifted, luminous despite the grime of her cheeks. "Are you hurt, ma'am?" "I am unharmed," she whispered. From his pocket, Jack pulled a crinkling foil bag. He'd been saving it since his last supply run. Potato chips, greasy, salty, irreplaceable on this side of the galaxy. He tore it open and held it out. "Not much of a meal," he said, "but better than nothing." The woman's eyes widened, surprise flickering across her lined face. She accepted the bag with trembling fingers. "Your kindness is unexpected." She placed one chip on her tongue, and her expression soft in wonder at the crunch. Behind them, a guard barked, "Move along. Both of you. You're disrupting business." Jack rose to his full height, squaring his shoulders. At 6'3", with years of combat shaping his frame, he towered over the insectoid guards. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need to. The unspoken threat was in the calm steadiness of his gaze, the way his weight settled like a man prepared to act. "We're going," he said evenly, offering his arm to the woman. She took it with a grace that belied her frail appearance. The guards exchanged glances, irritation crackling in the subtle click of their mandibles, but neither pressed further. The crowd shifted aside as Jack led her away, their whispers following him like a tide. Curiosity, judgment, disapproval. As they passed beneath the neon glow of the next thoroughfare, the woman's posture straightened slightly, though her voice remained soft. "You have given away something precious for one such as me." Jack smiled faintly, though he still felt the tension of the confrontation buzzing in his blood. "It's just a bag of chips," he said. "But no one should be left hungry. Not here, not anywhere." The words lingered between them, the simple act already rippling outward in ways Jack could not yet imagine. The bench near the fountain was carved from a translucent stone that pulsed faintly with inner light, a piece of Azuran craftsmanship imported at staggering cost. Its spray cast a cool mist into the air, softening the heat of the crowded market quarter. Jack guided the woman to it, steadying her as though she were made of glass. She settled with surprising composure, back straight, a bag of chips resting delicately in her lap. The market's din seemed to fade at that moment. Jack sat beside her, stretching his long legs and letting his eyes drift over the currents of alien life flowing past. Merchants hawked goods in a dozen languages. Neon signs flickered with shifting scripts. Scents of roasted flesh and ozone mingled in the air. Yet here, beside the fountain, time slowed. She plucked another chip from the bag, examining it between her slender fingers. "Fascinating," she murmured. "The texture is brittle, yet it dissolves swiftly. Such transformation of a simple tuber. This is art." She took a careful bite, eyes glimmering with appreciation. Jack chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Back home they're a cheap snack. Kids eat them straight out of vending machines. But when you're deployed for months at a time, a bag of these tastes like, well, home." Her gaze lingered on him. "Home," she repeated, as if savoring the concept more than the flavor. "Do you miss it?" "Every day," Jack admitted. "But you get used to distance. Out there, routine keeps you sane. And little things, like these chips, remind you what you're fighting for." Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained sharp. Spoken like a soldier who has seen too much. The comment cut close. Jack looked away, watching the glow of a shuttle rise beyond the station's transparent dome. "Maybe," he said. But even an old soldier still gets hungry. For a long moment they ate in companionable silence. Each crunch of a chip seemed absurdly loud against the background murmur of the market. Around them, passers-by cast curious glances. Some seemed bemused by the sight of a uniformed human commander sitting shoulder to shoulder with a beggar, sharing food as though they were kin. Finally she spoke again, voice steady. "I am Alanda." The name rolled off her tongue with quiet authority, though her appearance gave no hint of grandeur. "And may I know the name of the human who shares his meal with me?" "Jack Welch, Commander, Earth Coalition Forces." He extended a hand in the human fashion, which she studied before clasping with unexpected strength. "Commander Welch," she said, and there was something layered in her tone, something he couldn't quite place. "You are unlike the others here. Most walked past. Some even laughed. Yet you chose differently." Jack shifted uncomfortably. He had never cared for praise. Anyone would have done the same. Her eyes gleamed, catching the reflected lights of the fountain. "No," she said softly. "Not anyone." The crowd stirred suddenly, rippling like water before a ship's prow. Jack followed their gazes upward. Engines hummed a low, thrumming vibration that seemed to resonate in his chest. From the far end of the concourse, a sleek vessel descended toward the landing platform. Its hull shimmered as though woven from liquid silver, its design both elegant and impossibly advanced. The murmurs grew louder. Such a craft had no business docking at a public market. This was no freighter, no merchant transport. This was a ship of power. Elan Da calmly folded the chip bag and set it aside. Her hands, so frail moments before, moved with measured precision. She rose to her feet, back straight, eyes fixed on the descending vessel. Jack stood with her, every instinct sharpening. Soldiers recognized change before it happened. Something in the air shifted, heavy with expectation. The vessel touched down without a sound. A boarding ramp extended, smooth as flowing water. From within emerged a delegation of tall figures, draped in ceremonial garments that caught the light in shifting hues. Their leader broad-shouldered, skin the same blue shade as Alanda's, but marked with intricate silver. Pattern scanned the crowd with piercing eyes. His gaze landed on their bench. And to Jack's astonishment, he strode directly toward them. The old woman beside him smiled, serene and knowing. "The time is right," she whispered. Jack's pulse quickened, though he had no idea why. He only knew that, in the space of a heartbeat, the bag of potato chips between them had transformed into the axis of something far larger than himself. Vessel's ramp unfurled with the seamless precision of technology, far beyond the Coalition's standard ships. The crowd parted as if compelled by unseen force, murmurs rippling like wind through tall grass. Jack felt his shoulders tense, instinct urging him to assess entry points, possible weapons, lines of retreat. Old habits never truly left a soldier, no matter how far from the front he wandered. The delegation approached with synchronized grace, garments flowing as though woven from liquid light. At their head strode a man whose skin bore the same pale blue hue as the woman at Jack's side. Though his bearing was regal, his steps heavy with command. Intricate silver sigils traced across his brow and down his cheeks, glowing faintly under the concourse lights. When he reached them, he did not sneer or dismiss the ragged woman as the guards had. Instead, to Jack's shock, he bowed deeply, hands clasped over his chest, head lowered in reverence. His voice rang clear in the sudden hush. "Matriarch," he intoned, the single word carrying weight that silenced the concourse. "We have come for you?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. All eyes snapped to the frail woman who, until moments ago, had been scorned as a beggar. Yolanda, Jack realized with dawning disbelief, was no destitute elder. She straightened, her thin shoulders rolling back as though casting aside an invisible shroud. Her posture lengthened, her eyes blazed with a quiet authority that seemed to bend the very air around her. The tattered beige cloth she wore no longer looked like a mark of poverty, but a disguise. Discarded in an instant, the Varian guards who had shoved her earlier stood frozen, mandibles slack, as the reality sank in. Jack almost pitied them. Almost he turned to Alanda, still trying to reconcile the transformation. "Matriarch?" he asked, his voice low but edged with incredulity. She smiled at him, warm and utterly unhurried, as though she had all the time in the galaxy. "Commander Welch," she said, her tone now rich with authority that matched the bowing official before them. "Your kindness deserves recognition." She inclined her head toward the gleaming vessel. "Allow me to present you to my people." Jack felt 100 stares burning into his back, the judgment of an audience that had mocked her suffering minutes before. He forced himself to remain steady, though his thoughts tumbled over themselves. The chips. The simple act of kneeling, of sharing what little he had now magnified into something else entirely. At the top of the vessel's ramp, another figure appeared. The crowd shifted again, collective awe rolling through them. A young woman descended with a measured, fluid grace that held every gaze captive. Her skin was a smoother, more vibrant shade of blue, alive with vitality. A gown of shimmering fabric clung and flowed in perfect balance, accentuating her slender frame. Sapphire eyes caught Jack's across the distance, and for a breathless instant he felt pierced through. Yolanda extended her arm toward the girl. "Commander, this is my granddaughter, Liana." The name carried an almost musical resonance. Liana reached the bottom of the ramp and moved toward them, each step exuding a calm confidence that belied her youth. When her lips curved into a smile, it was not courtly or polite, it was something else. Curious, testing, almost amused. Jack's pulse quickened. He had faced down fire in forgotten trenches, fought skirmishes were odds tilted toward death, but never had his breath hitched from a look. He drew himself up instinctively, shoulders squared, jaw firm, unwilling to seem undone in front of the crowd. Elanda gestured between them, her eyes glimmering with something like mischief. "I believe the two of you have much to discuss." Behind them, the vessel hummed with restrained power, a ship designed not for trade, but for diplomacy or perhaps dominance. Around them, silence reigned, every being watching this unplanned theater. Jack realized, with sudden clarity, that the simplest act of compassion he had ever made had set him on a course he could neither predict nor escape. The boarding ramp felt almost alive beneath Jack's boots, pulsing faintly as though the ship itself breathed. The hull of the vessel shimmered close at hand, an iridescent surface that caught the station's neon light and scattered it in flowing waves. As he stepped aboard, a faint pressure shifted in his ears, the subtle seal of air systems far more advanced than any coalition frigate he had ever served on. Inside, the corridor curved like the inside of a seashell, walls gleaming with a soft bioluminescence that needed no lamps. Veins of light traced organic patterns across the surface, glowing and dimming in rhythm like a heartbeat. The air carried a crisp, invigorating quality, cool yet scented faintly with something floral, something alien. Jack inhaled deeply, realizing only then how recycled and metallic the station's atmosphere had been. Liana walked at his side, her stride unhurried, every movement a study in grace. Up close, he saw that her eyes weren't merely blue, but layered with tiny facets of sapphire light, catching glimmers like gemstones under sunlight. She caught him staring and tilted her head, amusement playing at her lips. "First time aboard an Azuran vessel?" she asked. Her voice was like polished crystal, melodic yet edged with authority. She seemed barely aware she carried. Jack let out a short breath. "First time even hearing of Azurans, to be honest. Earth's diplomatic reach doesn't extend this far." Liana's expression warmed, the faintest smirk tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Then consider yourself privileged. Few outsiders step onto the celestial harmony. Fewer still leave it with stories to tell." Her words carried a teasing undertone, though Jack couldn't decide if she was joking or warning him. He glanced around again, trying not to gape like a recruit on his first off-world posting. "Harmony, huh? Name fits. Everything looks balanced. That is our way," Liana said. "Every line, every light, every breath has purpose." She turned her gaze on him, weighing him in a way that felt sharper than any scan. "Do humans value harmony?" Jack chuckled under his breath. "We value survival. Harmony comes after." Her brows arched, her expression thoughtful, as if cataloging his answer for later. They entered a chamber at the corridor's end, spacious, circular, with walls of translucent pearl-like material. Tall panels revealed a breathtaking view of Orbit 9's sprawl below and the infinite starfield beyond. At the center, a ring of seats arranged around a low crystalline table glowed softly, casting ripples of light across the chamber. Ailanda entered behind them, now fully the matriarch, her posture regal, her presence commanding. The ragged disguise was forgotten, replaced not by finery, but by the intangible aura of power. She gestured for Jack to sit. "You must have questions," she said, her voice rich, every syllable a note in a well-rehearsed song. Jack lowered himself into one of the pearl seats, which molded to his frame as if it had been designed for him alone. "A few," he admitted dryly. Like why the ruler of an advanced civilization was getting tossed out of a grocery store. Liana's lips curved at the bluntness of his tone, though she remained silent. Alanda's eyes softened with something between pride and mischief. "Because truth is found not in ceremony, but in hardship. I needed to see how those without wealth are treated on your station. And I needed to know if humanity's compassion is more than myth. You were testing me." "Not only you," she corrected gently. We observed for 3 full cycles. Dozens passed. Most averted their gaze. Some mocked. Only you stepped forward, unbidden, without hope of gain. Jack leaned back, uneasy with the weight of her words. I didn't do anything special. Just gave away a snack. Yolanda's gaze deepened. History has turned on less. Before he could respond, the chamber's doors parted again. Figures entered in dignified silence, counselors, draped in elaborate robes, their expressions carefully schooled. Among them, one stood out. A tall male with silver-lined markings across his brow, his eyes sharp with calculation. He nodded to Yolanda, but spared only a brief, appraising glance at Jack. Liana's posture stiffened ever so slightly. Counselor Meredith, she murmured under her breath, just loud enough for Jack to hear. Jack tucked the name away. He knew the look of opposition when he saw it. Yolanda lifted a hand, drawing the counselors into the circle. Tonight, she declared, we begin a conversation that may reshape the stars. And it begins with a human who chose compassion over indifference. Jack felt the room's attention turn toward him, a dozen gazes heavy with skepticism, curiosity, and among some barely hidden hostility. His mouth went dry. He hadn't asked for any of this, but here he was. A soldier thrust into diplomacy without preparation, with only instinct and honesty as weapons. Liana leaned close, her shoulder brushing his. Her voice was a whisper, meant only for him. Do not let them see hesitation. Azurans admire strength, but they revere sincerity. Speak as you are, and you will be heard. Jack nodded, steadying himself. The chips had been a small gesture, a nothing. Yet here, under the crystalline glow of the celestial harmony, it had become the first step in something vast and perilous. Ceremonial arena of the celestial harmony was unlike anything Jack had seen. It stretched wide and circular, its walls rising high and smooth, illuminated by a pale blue radiance that mimicked sunlight filtered through deep water. Every surface gleamed with purpose. Even the floor shimmered faintly, as if the very material stored energy. Rows of tiered seating filled with Azuran dignitaries curved around the chamber, their eyes luminous in the half-light. Above them, the council sat in an elevated gallery, each member framed in an arch of light that made them appear as figures carved from the thong. Starlight Jack stood at one of the arena entrances, rolling his shoulders to loosen tight muscles. He had not fought for spectacle in years. Patrol skirmishes and frontier ambushes were one thing, this was ritual. This was diplomacy dressed in combat. A strange thrill coursed through him, part dread, part exhilaration. His uniform had been stripped down to a simple tunic and trousers, tailored by Azuran attendants. They had wrapped his hands in ceremonial bands, soft fibers threaded with silver strands that glowed faintly against his skin. Across the ring, the matriarch Yolanda sat in a position of honor, her regal bearing commanding the chamber. Beside her, Liana leaned forward, her eyes fixed on him, worry flickering just beneath her poise. When their gazes met, something unspoken passed between them. A promise, a warning, perhaps both. A resonant tone rang out, vibrating through the chamber like the strike of a massive bell. Advisor Thalon stepped into the center, his voice amplified by unseen means. Esteemed council, honored guests, today we witness a demonstration. Commander Jack Welch of Earth shall face the champions of the Azuran Guard. This trial will show whether humanity's strength is more than rumor, whether they are fit to stand beside us as allies. The first opponent entered with a brisk, almost cocky stride, a lean male Azuran, whose movements were quicksilver fluid. He saluted formally, his silver-lined skin markings pulsing faintly as he shifted into a low stance. Jack mirrored the gesture, recalling Liana's instructions, then settled into the fighter's calm he had honed long ago. Begin, Thalon commanded. Retreating quickly from the circle, the Azuran exploded into motion, His strikes came in blinding flurries, precise and aimed at joints and nerve clusters. Jack absorbed the first few blows with gritted teeth, realizing instantly that Azuran pressure points didn't match human physiology. Where one strike should have buckled his leg, it merely stung. Another, meant to paralyze his shoulder, left only a dull ache. Jack adapted, cataloging the rhythm of each strike. When the opening came, he drove an elbow into the Azuran's midsection, a move drawn from Earth's Muay Thai. The impact staggered his opponent, drawing a gasp from the crowd. Moments later, Jack locked the Azuran in a submission hold, forcing him to yield with a sharp gesture. The council murmured among themselves. Surprise flickered in their luminous eyes. Jack released the fighter with a respectful bow, and to his astonishment, the Azuran returned it. The second champion arrived immediately, a female warrior, taller and more lithe, her skin markings flowing in patterns that hinted at rank. She moved with acrobatic grace, her combat style an intricate dance that twisted physics itself. Her leaps defied gravity, her joints bent in ways no human could mirror. Jack found himself ducking, weaving, defending against strikes that came from impossible angles. A spinning kick slammed into his ribs, sending pain lancing through his side. He steadied himself, planting his feet, drawing on the stubborn endurance drilled into every soldier Earth had ever fielded. He adjusted his strategy, waiting, conserving strength. When she launched into another aerial strike, he moved in close, using her own momentum to drag her down. With a twist and a grunt, he pinned her to the floor. The chamber erupted in startled gasps. Jack rose slowly, ribs aching, his breath harsh in his throat. This time the council's murmurs carried not just surprise, but respect. Even Merith, stern in the gallery, leaned forward, his expression unreadable. The third and final opponent entered, and the arena's mood shifted at once. This one was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, shoulders twice the width of a human's, his movements slow, but filled with controlled menace. Liana's voice carried faintly across the arena, urgent. That is Counselor Merith's captain. Be wary, he knows forbidden forms. The giant bowed perfunctorily before lunging with terrifying speed. Jack barely raised his arms in time to block, the impact rattling his bones. The strikes came relentless, each one precise, each one meant to end the fight quickly. Jack staggered, blood on his lip, breath ragged. For minutes he could do nothing but defend, pushed back again and again. Then, with a sudden clarity born from years of surviving hopeless battles, Jack laughed. The sound echoed oddly in the vast chamber. His opponent faltered, thrown off balance by the unexpected reaction. Jack pressed forward, abandoning any attempt to mimic Azuran forms. He fought as a human, dirty, adaptive, unpredictable. Low kicks, feints, a headbutt that shocked the larger man, then a combination of strikes that ended in a brutal takedown. The giant hit the floor hard. Stunned, silence fell. The council leaned forward, breath held. Slowly, the Azuran champion raised a hand in surrender. Jack straightened, sweat streaking his face, bruises already swelling across his ribs, but unbowed. He extended a hand to help his opponent rise. After a long pause, the massive Azuran accepted it. Alanda's voice carried across the chamber, resonant and proud. This is humanity, she declared. They do not yield to pressure. They transform it into strength. The chamber erupted, half in applause, half in uneasy murmurs. Jack scanned the crowd, meeting Liana's eyes. She looked at him with something beyond pride, something that sent a warmth through his battered chest. But he also saw Merith's expression harden, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the fury beneath. The trial was over. The real war, Jack knew, had just begun. The chamber still vibrated with the echoes of the crowd as Jack was led from the arena. His chest ached with every breath, bruises burning beneath his tunic, but his mind was sharper than it had been in months. Combat stripped away hesitation, leaving only instinct, and instinct told him danger hadn't passed. Liana was waiting just beyond the archway, her sapphire eyes scanning him with the precision of a medic and the intimacy of something more. She reached for his arm, steadying him as though he were fragile glass. "You concealed your pain well," she murmured, her fingers brushing along his ribs, where her people's fabric had already darkened with blood. "But you cannot conceal everything. The council saw. Marith saw. That is why they will act quickly." Jack drew a slow breath, tasting iron. They already moved. During the fight, his guard kept touching his collar like he was receiving instructions. Liana's gaze hardened. "That is forbiddance. Even ceremonial combat is sacred." Jack wiped his mouth, smearing away blood with the back of his hand. "Then Marith's already broken tradition once. He'll break it again. Where's your grandmother?" Liana led him through a side passage, her grip firm on his arm as though she could will him forward by strength alone. The celestial harmony hummed around them, corridors alive with the quiet pulse of energy. They entered a chamber of soft blue light where the air carried the faint fragrance of herbs. The matriarch Yolanda sat within, her posture serene, speaking in low tones with advisor Thal on Dot. At the sight of Jack, Yolanda's eyes warmed with quiet pride. "You have given the council much to consider," she said. "But victory invites danger." Jack studied Fallon. The advisor's expression was careful, too careful, his eyes sliding to the side as though measuring unseen exits. "With respect, matriarch," Jack said evenly, "your inner circle may not be as loyal as you believe." Liana stiffened, glancing at Fallon, but Yolanda only tilted her head, calm as still water. "Speak plainly, Commander." Jack stepped closer. "During my bout, Marith's captain signaled to someone, and after the fight, I overheard 2 officers speaking about a delivery for tonight's banquet. They didn't know I was listening." His gaze sharpened. "If I'm right, it isn't food that's being served." For a flicker of a moment, Fallon's composure cracked. His hand twitched toward his belt. Jack moved without thinking, snaring the man's wrist in a soldier's iron grip. "I wouldn't," Jack growled, twisting until Fallon froze, breath hissing through clenched teeth. Liana's eyes widened, then narrowed with realization. "You were going to alert someone." Yolanda's voice was calm, yet steel lined its edges. "To whom, Fallon?" The advisor faltered, words clumsy. "Protocol. Requires immediate security reporting." "Protocol?" Yolanda cut him off smoothly. "I relieved Chief Nareen of duty this morning. There was no one to report to." The silence stretched. Fallon's gaze darted to the floor, then to Marith's unseen allies beyond these walls. With a sudden snarl, he tried to wrench free, hand diving for a concealed weapon. Jack struck hard, a soldier's reflex. His elbow drove into Fallon's chest, dropping him gasping to the floor. Jack stripped the weapon from his grasp and held it up to the matriarch, his expression grim. "You suspected a traitor," Jack said. "Now you have one." Yolanda regarded Fallon with cold dignity. "Indeed, I had not expected him to reveal himself so swiftly. Perhaps your presence accelerates truth." She rose, her bearing regal. "Commander Welch, Liana, this is no longer a question of suspicion. It is open treason. The council summons us within the hour. We must decide. Do we walk into Marith's trap, or do we turn it into his undoing?" Jack's mind worked fast, tactical gears turning. "3 prongs," he said. "We expose him, we protect you, and we formalize the alliance before his faction can regroup. If the vote names me interim ambassador, then any strike against you or me becomes an interstellar crisis, not a quiet coup." Liana's lips parted, her eyes flicking between him and her grandmother. "That is bold, risky." Jack offered a tight smile, still holding Fallon's weapon. "So is ignoring an ambush." Yolanda studied him in silence, then inclined her head. Perhaps fate placed you outside that store for this reason? Very well, Commander. You will stand beside me in council, not as a soldier, but as Earth's voice. And we will see who trembles when truth is spoken. The matriarch gestured for guards to drag Fallon away. As he was hauled from the chamber, his eyes burned with hatred, but his silence confirmed more than words. Lyanna stepped closer to Jack, her hand brushing his as though anchoring herself. Her voice was low, intimate, meant only for him. If we fail, Mareth's blade will not be aimed only at my grandmother. Jack closed his hand over hers, rough soldier's grip enclosing her delicate fingers. Then we don't fail. Her sapphire eyes met his, bright with both fear and trust. For a heartbeat, the hum of the ship, the plotting of enemies, the weight of politics, all of it fell away. It was only them, a soldier and an heiress bound together by choice in the face of danger. Beyond the chamber doors, the ship thrummed with preparations. Tonight would not be a banquet of peace. It would be a battlefield without walls. And Jack Welch was already on the front line. The grand hall of the celestial harmony glowed with a light that seemed drawn from the stars themselves. The amphitheater's tiers were filled with Azuran counselors, their luminous eyes fixed on the central platform. The air was taut with expectancy, humming with whispers that stopped the moment matriarch Yolanda entered. Jack walked beside her, every instinct thrumming with tension. He had fought in battles where the enemy's positions were unknown, where every step felt like a heartbeat away from death, but never had the air tasted so thick with betrayal. Lyanna flanked his other side, her gown flowing in liquid folds that shimmered with the hall's glow. To the untrained eye, she was regal and serene. To Jack, who had sparred, fought, and nearly bled out with her, she radiated alertness, her gaze flicking over every corridor, every guard. Beneath her calm, she was coiled and ready. The council chamber quieted as Yolanda mounted the central dais. "Counselors of Azura," she said, her voice carrying without strain, "today we were summoned to deliberate on humanity, on whether compassion and strength dwell within their kind." Mareth rose from his seat across the chamber, his silver-lined markings gleaming with cold authority. "And we have seen enough," he countered, his voice smooth but brittle beneath the veneer. "A soldier's brawling does not prove a civilization's worth. Humanity is reckless, unpredictable. They would destabilize everything we have built." Jack felt the heat of the council's gaze slide to him, some eyes skeptical, others hungry for proof. He resisted the urge to shift his stance. He had stood in front of firing squads with steadier nerves than this moment, but the stakes here were not just his life. They were history's. Yolanda lifted her hand. "Before judgment is cast, I invoke the primacy clause. Let it be recorded. I formally recognize Commander Jack Welch as Earth's interim ambassador." The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Mareth's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, his jaw tightening. "This is irregular," he barked. "The man is untrained, untested." Jack stepped forward, his voice steady, carrying on instincts honed in battlefield commands. "I've been tested enough for one lifetime, counselor. And maybe I don't know your etiquette, but I know this. When someone's thrown into the dirt, you don't walk by. You help them up. That's humanity. That's me. And if that's unworthy of alliance, then maybe your federation isn't as strong as it thinks." Gasps rippled again, but Jack didn't stop. His eyes locked on Mareth's. "You don't fear humanity because we're reckless. You fear us because we adapt. Because when pressure comes, we don't break, we change. That scares you. And it should." The chamber quivered with divided reaction, admiration, suspicion, anger. Yolanda's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. Lyanna's fingers brushed his hand where the council couldn't see, steadying him. Jack raised the small device Lyanna had slipped to him earlier. A holographic projection loomed above the dais. Intercepted communications. Marith's voice unmistakable as he conspired with Fallon and others to poison the banquet meal. To end the matriarch's rule in blood, the chamber froze. Marith lunged to his feet, a concealed weapon snapping into his hand. He fired upward, the bolt scorching the crystalline dome. Panic surged, but Jack was already moving. Training roared back his hand, slammed Marith's arm wide, the second bolt scorching harmlessly into the floor. Security swarmed, but not fast enough. Jack twisted, driving the weapon from Marith's grasp. Liana drew her own sidearm with startling precision, covering the conspirators who tried to rise. For a breathless moment, Jack and Liana stood back to back in the chaos, their breathing in sync, every angle covered dot when the last of Marith's supporters was dragged away in restraints. Silence descended once more. Alanda's voice rang out, resolute. "You have witnessed treachery laid bare. You have witnessed a human stand for truth, even when his own life balanced on the edge. This is the ally Azura shall embrace." The council's chambers flared with blue light as the majority signaled their assent. The decision was final. Humanity was recognized not as petitioners, but as partners. Later, in the grand banquet hall secured, inspected, and stripped of treachery, Jack stood beside Liana as the formal accord was signed. Yolanda's hands were steady as she etched her mark, then gestured for Jack to add his. His signature glowed across the treaty's crystalline surface, a permanent bond sealed not by protocol, but by kindness. Liana leaned close, her whisper brushing his ear. "Today you saved more than my grandmother. You saved us all." Jack glanced at her, seeing not just an ally, but someone who had walked into fire at his side and stood unshaken. "Funny," he murmured. "I thought I just shared my chips." Her laughter, soft and melodic, was answer enough not above them. The hall's bioluminescent banners unfurled in shades of blue and gold, a symbol of new beginnings. And as Jack stood beneath them, Liana's hand entwined with his, he realized the universe could pivot on the smallest acts, not battles, not treaties, but a soldier choosing to help an old woman outside a store. That had been the real victory. And it was only the beginning.